And I am live today, joined by the ever wonderful South African Mr. Ernst Van Ziel. That's how you say it correctly. From live from the Dark Continent. How are you doing today? I see you're going through rolling blackout right now. So,
Yeah, to add some production value to your show, I am currently in the middle, at the tail end of a rolling blackout. The power, you will literally see the power go on in just a few minutes. You'll see the lighting change. I'm currently on a rechargeable light bulb, and then my Wi-Fi is on a battery. So it's all I need at the moment to be able to join you here for this conversation. But like I said, that's life on the dark continent. Sometimes a real literal darkness.
literally and figuratively. I also like the tweet you said. Where a lot of us in the sphere, we'll call it, have this perspective that the collapse will just happen one day. Like just a bomb goes off. And
Mm,
everybody, we're all in wearing tight shirts or something and with buggies, trying to strap them together, fighting each other.
mm,
In reality, it's more of just a slower decline where
mm,
infrastructure starts failing, rails, train derailments happen every day, fires, government incompetency on a mass scale that
mm,
causes deaths,
mm.
which we're
I
seeing
think
in the
that's
US.
a I think that's a very important point. The nature of collapse, and I think South Africa is a great case study to give you an idea of what collapse is like. Everyone, I made that tweet today, and I reckon that's what you're referencing, where it's collapse. Everyone has this idea. Not everyone. Most people seem to have this idea that collapse is something that just happens, like immediately, and you wake up in a collapsed country. And that's not the case. You don't wake up in a collapsed system or a collapsed country. Collapse happens less like a bomb going off and more like a very, very slow motion car crash. Have you ever seen like some of those videos of like the slow mo guys or that type of real slow mo car crash against the wall? That's what collapse is like. It's the accumulation of small failures, and then it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. It starts off very simple. It starts off with things like a vandalized graveyard, or a old lady getting mugged in the street, or a shop getting looted, and then that just happens more frequently and more frequently and more intensely. That's what collapse is like. I don't think if you were to go back to any other time of a collapsed civilization or empire or country, let's just take the Roman Empire for example, the people living through the collapse wouldn't, I don't think, would call it, most of them wouldn't call it a collapse. They would see the decay, they would be able to identify it, but they wouldn't be telling, I think a lot of them wouldn't be telling you, oh, the Roman Empire is collapsing. I think that there were definitely people that saw it at the time, but I think at the same time collapse is something that's a lot more abstract. It's a lot more stretched out. It's not just something that happens immediately. And I think if you are expecting that type of collapse to happen in your own country or in South Africa, you're going to be waiting a while. You're going to see, like I said, the accumulation and the increase in incidents. And that's what we're seeing in South Africa. And not just here, we're seeing it abroad as well. In your own country, too, you're seeing an accumulation of incidents, more trains getting derailed, planes colliding on the runway, all these types of things.
Yeah, we're also seeing just stores just being looted every day now.
Mm,
It's not just like the summer of love. We all talked about it as this main revolution that was happening, but which was true. However, now
mm.
now it's just commonplace. Just happens every weekend in major cities in America.
It's weird that you mentioned that because it doesn't happen in the same way in the third world. Like it's almost worse in America than it is here. Yes, we have these very big flare ups of looting like we had
These
in
teams, right?
2021. But when it comes to the videos that I see coming from the US at the moment, it's not something I recognize. It's not something that's happening in South Africa on a daily basis. For example, there weren't any stories this year that I can remember in the South African news of stores just being looted on that scale and at that frequency, which is a strange contrast. I mean, I'm talking from my experience from the third world, and we're looking at your first world experience, and we're like, what the hell's going on?
I think you're just witnessing the decline in real time. However, I feel like it's a bit different because our elites are aligned with this. They're using this anarcho tyranny to benefit their rule. kind of suppress their political opponents while also releasing the criminals, releasing them out of jails, getting rid of cash bail. Um, America has a big undercarceration problem where we don't put enough of these criminals and mentally insane people in prisons, and so they just get let out on the streets where they commit more crime, more deaths, more stabbings, and you're just seeing that being accelerated with these people who are now in charge of the DAs and city councils in most American cities nowadays.
Mm. But when you find yourself within this context, I mean, America, I've said this on other shows as well. I know a lot, myself included, a lot of people draw parallels between, for example, South Africa and other countries. I often talk about the South Africanization of some countries, but on a sobering note, what people in America also need to realize is how far away you are from South Africa still. I mean, here I am sitting with rolling blackouts that have persisted since 2008. So for the last, sure, I mean, for I'm not the biggest math boffin, but you can stick with me. So it's probably for the past 15 to 17 years have just been rolling blackouts. So someone that grew up in that was born in 2008 is now 15 years old in 2023, and they don't know a South Africa without rolling blackouts. And that's the reality on the ground. So we're already very far down that road of deterioration of state capacity. So, yes, there's a lot of parallels to be drawn between the two, but you always have to remain sober in the fact that you're not going to South Africanize within the next 5 years. You're not going to get to the point where we are by 2025. This is going to be a very long process. It was for us a long process. I mean, this has been something that's been going on for decades, this deterioration. So I think that's an important point for specifically Americans to keep in mind when they're talking about deterioration, collapse, all these types of things, is to also stay sober, not to get carried away, and remember that you still have it good. You still have it very good, and you'll know when you become more like South Africa. It's gonna be rough.
No, I like what you said on one of your streams, where you said that you're living in the future, we're still living in the past.
Hmm.
Us and the Europeans, where we still like are living in comfort mostly. It's still safe to go outside mostly. You don't have to have private security in your own communities like 24/7.
Mm.
There's
Well,
a constant
I,
threat against your life.
I wish I could say that was my own original idea, but it's actually one of my colleagues within the Solidarity Movement, Flip Base, the chairperson of the Solidarity Movement. He writes in his book, Die Pad na Selfbestuur. Let me just get it in. Unfortunately, it's not translated into English yet. Maybe one day when I have time, I'll
No,
do
it's
that.
based. We don't want Americanization, as you talked about.
So this is Flabay. Yeah, his nickname is Flabased. So Flabase wrote this book, The Pad na Selfbestuur, translated The Road to Self-Governance. And in that book, he makes that point exactly. He says South Africa, but he makes it in the context of just South Africa. He says uh, in the north of the country, where you see a lot more deterioration than, for example, in the Western Cape, there the future has already happened, and in the Western Cape, the future still has to yet to arrive. And I just took that metaphor and I just expanded it to the world in one of my pieces. There, the power's back
Oh,
on.
there you go.
You can see the difference. I mean, you can see I didn't pull any levers. There's no trickery here. It is that's just the guy at the national power utility, or at the electricity state monopoly, finding the button and pressing. Okay, now that's your neighborhood gets power again. That's I mean, that's the way South Africans cope. We make some jokes about it, but yeah, just to end that point. Yeah, the future has happened in South Africa, and the future hasn't happened in many other countries, but that's your advantage. I mean, what better position to, well, there could be better positions, but there's a lot, what better position to be in where you can actually see, you get a tsunami warning, or you get a warning of what might happen, or a future that might transpire, and you actually have a time to prepare for it, or even to avert it. but I don't see a lot of people seeing it that way. I just see a lot of it could never happen here, still from a lot of people left and right.
No, that probably is still a prevailing mindset, especially among the comfortable suburbanites here, which there are still quite a lot of them. However, as that comfort and those safe places, where there's no crime, suddenly crime starts popping up in those cities, and those safe spaces start to disappear more and more and more. It's going to be increasingly obvious that there's nowhere to run. You
Mm,
can't endlessly retreat. That's a famous line from Stalin. You may think that we have endless land to retreat into, but we don't. You have to eventually stop and make a stand here. Otherwise, you're going to lose the whole battle here. Ultimately.
mm. Yeah, well, that I use the metaphor of the rising water. I mean, at some point, there's going to be no higher ground to flee to, and I just see a lot of people fleeing to higher ground. And you have
Flee
to
for
realize at
Europe
some point
is a popular one.
it's gonna run out somewhere. And if you don't take a stand now, you're just dooming your grandchildren that they have to take a stand, and rather you than them. But unfortunately, a lot of people rather just outsourced the solving of our problems to the next generation. I mean, that's what happened to a large extent to our generation. You and me are both within the Generation Z or Generation Z. And at the same time, a lot of the problems of the past were outsourced to us, that we have to solve it now. And unfortunately, due to human nature, I probably see a lot of people in our time doing the same. See, thinking that, oh, well, we're not going to be able to solve these problems. Like, for example, a ballooning national debt. We're just going to let the next generation inherit it. That's the sad reality of the time that we live in, where problems aren't solved in the present. They just postpone and they get worse and worse and worse. And debt is the best example.
We also have a strange issue here where the older generations, like still because they have all of the wealth and they grew up in the most prosperous era, I'll say in the 50s and 60s, they're still buying up all of the real estate. So basically, none of the older generations can own a house at all or start a family. That's basically impossible for most people nowadays. And they're still hoarding most of the wealth. So you see, this mindset comes directly from these people. Oh, well, we're just going to offload it to the next generation and they're going to be worse
They'll
off.
figure it out.
And then they're going to be worse off. And then they're going to be
Mm,
worse off. But we're still going to hoard the things because at least we still have the good stuff. They're
mm,
they're it's an incredibly selfish mindset which took over the West, in
mm.
part, which
Yeah, and
led to its
unfortunately,
downfall.
that mindset can be very easily passed on to our generation as well. We might easily do exactly the same thing, and that's our mission, is that we have to prevent that from happening.
Yes, and getting the solutions because we could talk about the problems all day long, and there's plenty of people who make a living off that. Talk about the
Yeah.
endless problems and blackpill people. But let's talk about actual solutions. But before we do, I want to say that you guys are an inspiration to me because as bad as things are getting, as the decline and everything, it makes me realize, wow, we still have it good. Like I don't have to have like security 24/7, as a must, or like community protection, even though I think that's an incredibly based thing,
Mm,
as a necessary thing for your own safety because of a hostile population and like people openly calling for, I think it's fair to say, genocide, or massacres, especially EFF types and other agitators in the ANC ruling regime that you guys have over there. We don't have that yet, but we're seeing the foundations of that being started here against white Americans. And it makes me think that, like, you guys have still, even with that immense persecution from these people who are in charge of your country, you still have your own communities, you still have families, you still have your own churches, you have your own universities, I believe, you have your own professors, your own hospitals, like your own currencies. Like, what makes you guys persevere through all this
mm,
persecution and these threats, against you guys?
mm. Well, firstly, maybe just an important point is that there's a myriad of a large collection of different solutions and approaches. So, for example, um, the solidarity movement that I'm part of and that I can tell you a lot about. There's a lot that we do. Let me just get to the important stuff first. So AfriForum that I work for, it's part of the solidarity movement. We do civil rights cases against the government, and interesting enough, civil rights in South Africa takes on a completely different form than in America. So in America, you have a certain specific idea of what civil rights are, but then you look at South Africa and the dynamics just completely different. So just an example there, here the minority majority dynamic is completely reversed. So here you have a white minority and a black majority. You have a government that institutes racially discriminatory laws to benefit the majority. You have a government that allows or you have a court system that appears to allow the singing of songs that call for the murder of a minority group. And these are the types of things that civil rights cases in our courts that, for example, AfriForum do, the types of things that we challenge. But that's the context that you have to keep in mind when, for example, I tell you we do civil rights cases. You can't just fall back on an American context for that. But then we also do the neighborhood watches. We have over 165 neighborhood watches all across the country. The Solidarity Movement has built the Soltech campus, which is a technical college, massive campus that has thousands of students already. Completely funded by the community and community sources of income for small donations. Like, I mean, not even some, many, there was the donations that came in. Most of them weren't even $1 exchange rate taken into account. Other thing that we do is we fix thousands of potholes. We paint street signs. We plant trees. We have a theater. We have the list goes on and on. But the bottom line is there's other strategies as well for survival and cultural preservation. Urania, the Afrikaner town in the Karoo Desert or the Northern Cape, is another one. So it's not a solidarity movement initiative. They're allies of us. We work together. We support each other. But they have their own solution for the future on how to preserve Afrikaner culture and create a future for Afrikaners here at the southern tip of Africa. So when you mention, for example, currency, that falls more under Urania. It's not technically a currency, but it operates almost like one. It's a coupon system, or I think that's the nearest English word to it, where you can use the Ura. I have some here, but it's not within reach now, where you pretty much pay with it, and then you get a discount if you use it within the town. And they have amazing projects like their Ura Sol, where they're getting off getting independent in regards to electricity, already independent in regards to water. They're doing amazing stuff. So there's all these different ways of finding solutions for the future, and we welcome it in the sense that it's very dangerous to put all of your eggs in one basket. I would never support that idea where you find one ultimate way to solve the problems of your community or country, or build a future for yourself, and then you say, well, we're going to put all the chips on the table on this solution. I don't think that's very smart. You need to have a multitude of options. And I think it's a term that's become completely hijacked, but you need a diverse selection of approaches to solving the problem, because if one of them fails, you always have the other one. So it's the best example would be, or a metaphor for it would be like investing in companies. So if you invest all your money in just one company and it folds, all your investment is gone. But if you invest it strategically in more than one company, there you have a better chance. So the bottom line is, I think it's good that there's a diversity of different solutions here developing and being pioneered in South Africa. I'm part of just one of them, the Solidarity Movement and AfriForum. And there's, like I said, a lot to share, but I don't want to just be, I don't want to hog all your time just constantly talking. Please share some of your thoughts as well.
No, it's great to hear that you guys have actual solutions. Here in the West, we have a big problem where all the people on we'll just call it the dissident right. To be very broad, they'll always talk about these problems. Oh, the government. Oh, they're burning down buildings, robbings. Homeless people. All these problems. And then they never do anything. They just sit there and bitch, and they make live streams, and they go in their Telegram chats, and they don't do anything. And then they go still order Uber Eats or something. They still live in the suburbs, no actual solutions. Then there's another crowd, which is all right. Things are bad. Things are going to head to the South Africa option. So what am I going to do? What's the easiest thing to do? Oh, Eastern Europe. I can flee right there, right now. I just gotta buy a ticket, and then I'll go over there and LARP as a savior of Western civilization because I'm doing something, because I feel safer and it's easier. We don't have people building actual like institutions like you said on the groundwork. I think you've said this before. Ronio was started in 1991.
Hmm.
We don't even have anything like that. All we have is I think we have YouTube videos and podcasts discussing
Mm.
the problems of our society. We don't have anything like that.
Mm. But that doesn't mean that there can't be anything like that. It's just, yeah, it's a matter of taking initiative. The best example for me is statues. I've made this point, and it's it gets some people irritated, but I mean, it's the way things are. So every time leftists or liberals or the government in America builds an ugly statue, that like a genuinely just unaesthetic statue, that's just a horrible mess. What do conservatives or people on the right do? They just write opinion pieces about how ugly the statue is instead of actually building their own statues. Like, it's not illegal, if I'm correct, to build your own statue in America. I mean, there are ways. It doesn't have to be the Statue of Liberty. I mean, just this week I saw a statue at one of another Afrikaans institution that's self-funded and community-based, that I visited to do a presentation there on one of my documentaries. They had a statue there that they have. That wasn't built by the government. It wasn't funded by the government. It's not impossible. I mean, it's far from impossible. But all I see are people moaning and complaining about the ugly statues of the left, and I haven't seen a single statue in America built by a Republican voter or by a conservative honoring the things that they view as beautiful, the values that they support. And that's the mind shift that's going to have to happen. You can't just write opinion pieces. You can't just do podcasts when there are real things that you can do to make a difference, real things that will have an impact on the world around you. I think one of the opinion pieces or tweets was something like, the artistic style of the 21st century is going to go down as one of the ugliest in human history. And my response was, you can't talk about the artistic style of your time or complain about it if you haven't even done anything to try and influence the artistic style of your time in any way. That's the bottom line. If you have to, you can, and you have to do something from your own side to influence the artistic style of your time. There are people starting to do it, like Fen de Villiers, who is sculpting beautiful sculptures with aesthetic qualities, with value, imbued with values that conservatives value. But there needs to be a lot more. It can't just be a handful of people, and you can't just keep complaining that there's no beauty in the world and my opponents are building ugly things, but you haven't built a single beautiful thing in your life, even if it's even something small.
No, I think that's a very pertinent point. It's a very loser mentality because you have to understand. Here in the West, we have a beaten spouse mentality because we've just been beaten by the left for like over 100 years at this point with our culture. So that basically our only response is to like cry and moan about the beating. Honestly, I think there's a psychological thing there as to why, but the first reaction is just to like bitch, cry, complain,
Make excuses.
or they like to be idolaters of the act and well, let's go storm the Capitol, let's go do something productive, and then it's a honeypot. They all get arrested, put in jail, and then their ally
Mm.
Trump is gonna, oh nope, not gonna bail you out. Sorry, you
Mm.
can rot in prison. So none of them are great solutions. But you guys have started with the practical first, I think, and that's
Mm.
we talk about these high ideas. Oh, we need to destroy the GAE, the global American empire. Well, let's start first at your local community first, and most of these people don't even like get off their Discord apps for most of the day. I mean, if I'm being
Mm.
honest, they
Mm.
stay on Discord for over 8 hours a day. So probably the first step would
Mm.
just be to get off the internet for 5 minutes or something to actually achieve
Mm.
something meaningful with these people. Because I feel like you could talk about, well, you need to do action, but for most of these people, all they do is they sit on their computers or play video games or hang out playing Call of Duty. So they need to get out of their safe space first. I think is the first big step for any genuine action can begin to take place. And I feel like
Mm.
the power outages there help you guys actually because you don't have all of these distractions. You don't have all the
I get all of
Wi-Fi.
my reading done during the I get all of my reading done during the rolling blackouts. It actually does. You're completely right. It does give me the opportunity or the motivation to do some reading, like physical hold a book reading.
You don't have Netflix and everything like Disney Plus like on your like Prime TV and with 50 subscriptions to watch endless amounts of entertainment 24/7 without a break and Cheetos and McDonald's on delivery, anytime you want pretty much anywhere in the country. So we still have the bread and circuses that keep people satisfied enough.
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that the idolaters of the act. Again, it's an idea that I talk about, but it's thought up by someone much smarter than me, MP van Wyk Louw, probably the forefront Afrikaner philosopher of the previous century. And yeah, I'm glad that you understand the concept because I think it's so important for our time. The whole idea that you're going to have a lot of people that say, enough talk there, enough debate, enough writing. We need action. We need men of action. Someone do something. And then there's the two types of idolaters of the act. The one that says do something when you ask them what, they genuinely don't know. They just want to see something. So they're not helpful, but they're not evil. They're not malicious. They just don't have an idea. But then there's the malicious idolaters of the act that actually have evil intent, that are pretty much want to send people on suicide missions where they will end up either in a prison cell or in a coffin. And they have been, these idolaters of the act have been responsible for sending many a young man to his grave or to prison. And that we have to be very careful of them. Doesn't mean that there's not a very genuine need for action, but that action needs to be thoroughly thought through, and it needs to be discussed. It can't just be shoot from the hip. It can't just be at least they're doing something. Well, my grandfather always said, doing nothing is better than doing something stupid. And I think that's the type of approach that we also need to take. Action on its own is not a virtue. It needs to be the right action at the right time. And it needs to be action based on the right foundations and on the right principles. Maybe just a final thought there to end off that one. The amount of time and energy many are still willing to spend on just thinking of a never-ending list of excuses on why they don't want to do something meaningful, like take part in a community-based or decentralized solutions, is actually quite astonishing. It seems like the deal breaker is just you'll have to do work. A lot of people just want to hear the nice story of you'll be saved by like a Caesar or by a big hero or some big leader. The God
Just
Emperor is
vote in
going to
this
come
next
save you.
election for this
Yeah,
candidate and just
that's all you have to do. All you have to do is to make your little X on this piece of paper and you've done your duty. I mean, sure, man. The West is in a very bad place. If that is the pinnacle of community engagement and fulfilling your duty is just standing in a line for 10 minutes to make a little X on a piece of paper and then you go home and pat yourself on the back and have a cold beer.
Although I feel like America is in a better state than Europe is because we aren't as secular yet. We still have a bunch of church communities here, and that's great.
Mm,
Building their own Bible study groups. We still have local communities here. It isn't as
mm,
bad as Europe, from what I hear from people from Europe. Europe is far more secular, just consumeristic. So they really don't have any community in Europe really to speak of. I mean, I can't really think of any besides being united in gay pride parades with NATO oversight.
mm.
So I think that is
And
one positive that we have going.
the other thing also is a lot of people, the premier excuse I always hear when, for example, when I share these types of initiatives that we're doing and I talk about the solutions that we're doing, they always say, well, I don't have the money or the time to do that. I mean, I'm like, you don't, nobody is expecting you to donate $50,000 to an initiative or to spend 5 hours every day on something. If you, here's the bottom line, and here's the uncomfortable fact. I mean, it's not a genius idea, it's not groundbreaking stuff, but I mean, it's actually, I'm very surprised that I have to continue repeating this, but it's worth repeating. It's a very simple idea. If you if you dedicate 30 minutes a week to a community based initiative or to make your community cleaner, safer, better, you are already doing more than 90% of people out there. And people don't want to hear that. They want to hear, well, if you can't spend 10 hours a day helping your community, then you're worthless, then you might as well not do it, because then they have an excuse, because then they can say, well, I don't have 10 hours a day, so I'm not going to do it. Or if they want to hear, I need you to donate $50,000 a year to this initiative, or else you're not making a difference, then they're just going to say, oh, well, I don't have $50,000. But that's not the reality. The uncomfortable reality for so many people is, if you're just donating $5 a year to a community-based initiative, or to an organization or club or anything that's making your community better, you're already doing more than the absolute vast majority of people out there. And that's all that's expected of you, is to give as much as you can and to do as much as you can within your own capacity, even if that capacity is spending 10 minutes a week picking up litter, or making your community or your neighborhood a better or safer place, or donating $1 a year to a community-based initiative. Then you're already doing so much more than all those millions of people, hundreds of millions of people out there that are just telling themselves, I'm too small to make a difference, I don't have enough money to make a difference, I don't have enough time to make a difference or to impact the world.
You know what's so
Well,
funny about those people who will constantly
yeah,
complain of that? And most of them are online. So automatically, two things. They have an internet connection, so they're paying for Wi-Fi. And
they're
somehow
smoking
they're
cigarettes, they're drinking booze.
so they have the resource, they have resources, it's just it's going to their vices. So
Oh, I
it's
mean,
quite
that's the
funny.
thing. I tell people, can you, when they tell me those types of excuses, because even here in South Africa, I hear it so much. I just ask them, are you, if they're a smoker, I ask them, can you survive with one less packet of cigarettes this month? And you take that money that you spend on that one packet of cigarettes less, and you give it and you donate it to a initiative or organization, or someone that's a organization that's active in your community or in your neighborhood. And it just floors them, because they don't want to hear that. They want to hear, you have to be giving thousands of dollars away. You have to be dedicating your entire life to making a difference. But you can, if you organize, with one other based person in your town or your part or your suburb or your part of your city, you already can do a lot more than everyone else around you, because you've got a team. The technical definition of a team is two people. AfriForum started with 3 people. Solidarity started with 1. Stop making all these excuses. AfriForum started with 3 people in 2006, and now we're 310,000 members. This is not beyond the reach of the average person. We don't have billionaire donors. We don't have Elon Musk money. We don't have government funding. We don't have big corporates showering us in money. It's all a community-based donation system where people give a minimum of 30 Rand, which is probably $2 a month. And then we use that money to do everything from filling thousands of potholes, doing our neighborhood watches, doing court cases against the government, of which we win so many. And also the solidarity movement, building institutions of tertiary education, all through grassroots funding. And the advantage of that is that if you're funded by billionaires, if you're funded by big corporates, they can put you in a vice. They can twist the screws and tell you, you're going to do this, otherwise we're pulling our funding. That puts you in a very difficult situation. So our model, where you're funded by hundreds of thousands, or when you're small thousands of people, means that you have to piss off immensely all of those people to the point where they withdraw their money tomorrow for your organization to really be to have the screws put to it. But as long as you stick to your principles and you do the right thing and you're doing good work, that the type of work that inspired those people to support you in the first place, that model is the most resilient. And one individual or a collection of oligarchs or a collection of influential donors can't control you, and you can actually keep your eyes on the ball, keep your eyes on the mission without getting distracted by little petty threats of pulling of funding.
Yeah, it's quite interesting here in America in the red states. We call it the right-wing states. I'm sure you know the political map of America, the two major
Mm-hmm.
parties.
Don't show me a map and ask me what's
No,
that
I'm
state
not going to show
name.
that. I'm just going to show this as an example of what you're talking about. So in a lot of red states, we actually have them pushing drag queen story hour and trans kids at the local school boards in essentially right-wing states. Why? Because the left is more active on local school boards. Is why for the most part they show up more, they get people elected more, and they donate more to these local races. And whereas the conservative opposition, watching NASCAR and drinking beer, for the most part. And so, who's going to win? I mean, all it takes is 5 people to show up. They're going to show up. They're going to win. And this is how you take over one municipality, one city, one state, one
Mm,
country at a time.
mm,
It's very small, greatness from small beginnings.
I mean, there's no law that says only the left can use that strategy, because that's exactly how they take over organizations, schools, churches, states, countries. Let's take the example of an organization, like let's take a university is the best example. It happens here in South Africa. So you've got like SRC, Student Council, uh, like the student elected council, that have influence on the university, that can exact pressure on the university, but all the students are too lazy to go to the meetings or to go vote in the student council elections. So the radical parties, the Marxist Leninist students and the leftist students on the campus, all just go to the boring meetings, and they go organized to go vote in the student elections, and they win by a landslide, but they're a micro minority on campus. Same happens within organizations. So the same happens within an organization where everyone else is too lazy to go to the boring meetings where the agenda for the year is determined, where, or like, for example, let's take school board meetings, parent meetings. I don't know what you call them in America and
We
South
call them
Africa. Just be
PTA meetings.
the parent teacher, or like the parent board meetings. The people that go, it's boring, so nobody goes. And then all the left wing or liberal parents go to those meetings, because they know if only 5 or 10 of them show up to that meeting, and they can outlast the rest of the people there, and just make it as boring as possible and last till the end where they vote, then they'll all just vote for the policies and the things that they want. They go that extra mile. They understand the principle that if you do the things that other people don't want to do, especially in the pursuit of control and influence and power, you're going to end up with it, because you just outlast the people that get bored, or the people that have better things to do than go sit in a 2-hour PTA meeting. So that's how they take over these institutions. It's a very simple concept, but it's a very strong message that's being sent to conservatives as well. As if you want any chance of taking back these institutions or influencing these institutions, you're going to have to go to the boring meetings. You're going to have to organize. You're going to have to go and spend some time in meetings at your school, meetings at your church, meetings within whatever social organization operates in that way. You're going to have to go do it. It's not nice. It's going to be boring. It's going to be soul crushing at times. But if you don't do that, the people that understand how to manipulate that system, and the people that understand how to take over that system, are going to take over it, and are going to completely just transform it, as has happened already. So it's, unfortunately, I'm not here with a message, the equivalent of handing out candy.
No, you're not the
Handing
Steve
out
Turley. Steve
handing
Turley.
out candy would be telling people, don't worry, some conservative intellectuals will sort it out. The next election, you just need to win the next election. You don't have to really do anything. I'm here not selling candy, I'm selling medicine and vegetables. I'm telling you, you're going to have to exercise metaphorically. You're going to have to eat your vegetables metaphorically. You're going to have to drink your medicine metaphorically. And drinking your medicine, eating your vegetables, and exercising entails doing the boring stuff, doing the hard stuff, doing the difficult stuff. That's the reality. If you're not willing to do that, well, then you're not then you don't deserve living in a prosperous society if you're not willing to do the difficult stuff.
Yeah, I feel like that's a problem with a lot of people, especially in the West. Is that they don't want to hear that stuff. Whenever you try to say the practical stuff, like you just said, all of that is very achievable, can instantly be done fairly easily with not a lot of
Mm.
effort that anybody could really do.
You don't need a lot of people.
It's not sexy though. It's not.
Yeah.
Well, let's go storm the Capitol. Let's go do
Mm.
this. Let's go form a massive protest. Let's go
Mm.
do this because oh, that's more attractive. All the
Mm.
boring stuff. Who wants to do that? Who wants to show up at a boring meeting where they're going to
Mm.
determine the school curriculum for your school that's going to teach your
Or the
children?
budget of the school. What are we going to spend money on? Yeah.
And so they just don't show up, or they waste their time doing the stupid acts, which gets them arrested, ruins their lives, or gets them killed.
Mm.
So
Mm.
it's a pretty big trap we are. But I want to get into one last thing as we kind of
Mm-hmm.
near the end. So can you talk about like why you just don't flee to the West? Like why you fight to preserve your culture, your people.
Mm.
Like what motivates you actually to do that and stay? Because I mean, I think it's fair to say that the vast majority of South Africa despises you. I mean, to a large degree, or they're influenced by the tiny minority that does. So, what drives you, to stay when you could easily flee to Australia or something, or to
Mm.
America?
Well, there's a lot. Firstly, the knowledge that the vast majority of the population here doesn't despise me. The people that despise me are the deracinated urbanites, the people that are just sad in a sad state where they've been completely their roots have been severed. They adrift in a sea of chaos, and now they're lashing out and they want to make misery doesn't like company. Misery needs company. So in the end, but that's just to clarify that. But when it comes to really the motivating forces behind why people like me stay, and everyone that works for the Solidarity Movement and AfriForum and a lot of other people, is the fact that, well, firstly, you have to understand the context of Afrikaners within the bigger picture. Alistair Sparks actually summed it up very well. So he's not a conservative. He's actually a more of a liberal historian, but he wrote a pretty decent book, The Mind of South Africa. And in that book, he makes a point where he says, so this book was written in 1991, so it's 3 years before the elections in South Africa. And he makes the point there where he says he's not an Afrikaner, but he understands the existential anxiety of the Afrikaners in this time. Because what's happening, or the challenge that they face at this moment, is that him as a white English South African, if the South African experiment, the new South Africa, doesn't work and it fails and it all goes sour, he can just emigrate to Australia, America, England, New Zealand, Canada, list goes on, the entire Anglosphere. And he will be surrounded by people that share a culture, language with him, have a similar connection in regards to heritage. Maybe not that they don't have an Africa chapter in their heritage, but they have the English Anglo chapter and the English Empire chapter and the British chapter and the British background. And his identity will remain intact. But if the South African experiment doesn't work out for the Afrikaners, they have nowhere to go. There is no other Afrikaner country out there. The Dutch are not the Afrikaners. That's another big misconception. We're not just Africanized Dutch. So just take me, for example. I'm the walking example of what Afrikaners are to a large extent. I'm a mixture of German, French, Dutch, Scottish, and Flemish. So it's just this Western European mutt mongrel mixture. But that's the Afrikaner story. We're not Dutch. We're not German. We're not French. We're a distinct identity. And Afrikaners that immigrate within 1 or 2 generations without fail just completely assimilate into that new identity. They become Canadians, New Zealanders, Australians, Americans. And you have to ask yourself the question, is that, if you value and love your culture and you want it existing into the future, are you willing to let it become a fossil of history? I'm not willing to let it become a fossil of history. Whether to immigrate or not is a deeply personal question. I would never normatively tell anyone that you have to stay or you have to leave, but I will share my own feelings around it, and I will share my own experience around it. My first ancestor came here into South Africa, or Southern Africa at that time, in 1688. That's before the United States was a country. I'm the ninth generation of my family here. I don't have another country to go to that's home. The Netherlands is not my home. Germany is not my home. England's not my home. If I were to move there, it would be the end of my line of Afrikaners, my family's line as Afrikaners, and my family's line would become, and the new chapter would begin as Canadians or Australians or whatever. But if all Afrikaners were to leave tomorrow, if you were to snap your fingers and they all were just strewn all across the Western world, within 1 or 2 or 3 generations, the Afrikaner identity and culture will be dead. It will have died out. It will have gone extinct. It will be something you read about in history books, will be something you read about online. Some people will LARP as Afrikaners, but there won't be any real Afrikaners left. The children of those people will all identify with the identities of the countries that they moved to, and they will feel no connection to the Battle of Blood River, the Great Trek, Anglo-Boer War, or any of those events, all of those foundational stories. And that's the bigger picture, is where there's a lot of other factors as well. I'm also not willing to raise my children closer to the epicenter. If the epicenter of wokeness, or all this just chaos and insanity that we're seeing across the Western world, if that is a nuclear bomb going off, South Africa is pretty far away. We still get a little bit of radiation. It still spreads to here, but I'm not moving closer to the epicenter. I'm not going to be moving closer to where people are growing 3 arms and 5 legs, and closer to the Chernobyl disaster. But that's my personal choice. I'd rather raise my children here, even though it comes with many of its own challenges. You have to also be, I can be very, I can list you all the different challenges of staying in South Africa, but a lot of people that immigrate aren't willing to list all of the challenges and costs of that choice. And I think that's where the real conversation is to be had, when you can talk frankly and directly and honestly about both options, the costs and benefits of both. I can talk endlessly about both the costs and benefits of staying. And when it comes to what all I see is people moving closer to Western countries, closer to the epicenter of all of this insanity, and their children coming home from school and hating their parents, their children coming home from school and not knowing whether they're a boy or a girl, their children not coming home from school, all of these different things. And it's all a cost benefit thing when it comes to that. You have to think about what's important. You have to think about the real risks of staying and the risks of leaving. And my ancestors made those calculations every generation. I'll start wrapping it up with this. So the Voortrekkers, they made that cost benefit analysis. So when the English came and annexed and took over the Cape in 1806, the Dutch and at that time, proto-Afrikaners, they weren't completely Afrikaners yet. A lot still has to happen, but they're not Dutch really anymore. But let's call them the Afrikaners for argument's sake, that lived in the Cape at that time, were facing a choice. They either could live under the British Empire and become anglicized, and don't let any propagandists tell you that wasn't happening. The British Empire was trying to anglicize Afrikaners at every opportunity. They would have better access to infrastructure and better access to education, better access to business opportunities, safer, better security if they stayed. but they chose to leave their farms and their lives and their businesses and their schools and everything behind and trek into the great unknown, into the interior of Africa, where they didn't have any maps or anything. They just, the maps that they did have were quite crude. They just went in a direction away because they wanted freedom and not to live under the boots of the imperial force. And then very, very, very long story short, then they, as fate would have it, discovered diamonds and gold within the territories of their new republics. And then the empire comes after them again, for a different reason this time. And this time they decide not to move. This time they decide now it's time to dig a trench. And they dig literal trenches in the First and Second Anglo-Boer War. So, but again, in response to an existential threat, the Boer republics, if you lose this war, are going to be destroyed. And unfortunately, due to the scorched earth policies and the concentration camps, that was what happened. Boer republics destroyed. That's every generation. And there's many other examples as well. Every generation of Afrikaners have come to that choice, whether it's a time to move or a time to dig trenches. For me, it's a time to dig trenches. Some others might come to the conclusion that it's a time to move. But let's see what the future holds. I'm throwing in my lot with the trench diggers here in South Africa. I'm betting my time and effort and putting everything I have into a solution here, rather than taking my chances closer to the epicenter of all this chaos and all this insanity.
I think that's well said. A lot of these, I'll call them cowards, who want, the first solution is to flee their own countries, their societies, abandon them, go to Australia or something, go to New Zealand, go to Eastern Europe because it's safe. There's low crime and there's free shopping. Is that number one is cowardly, but also you're giving up a long-term cost. You're essentially saying that giving heed to the death of your own culture and people isn't reproducing anymore. When you look at a large part of the West, they don't have enough kids anyway. So you're committing to the death of your own culture and people in the long run. And then you're going to assimilate into this other country, which is foreign to you and your culture, and have nothing in common in the long run. That's going to create a lot of problems. And then ultimately, we also have to think about, well, the pause is coming for them too. It doesn't stop, in an arbitrary line in the middle of Europe or America. It comes for Eastern Europe too, or Australia. So eventually, they're going to be just as woke as the U.S. is, and they're going to have immigrants. They're going to have unsafe cities, mass chaos, and then what are you going to do? Well, eventually you're going to run out of places to flee to. So you're ultimately just delaying the same problem.
And outsourcing it to your children, and outsourcing it to your grandchildren.
Which is probably why I'm going to stay and wait out the decline of my people and my culture here.
Oh, well, that's the question is how important is your identity as an American to you? If you were to immigrate to, I know
I
you're
wouldn't
not
identify
going
as
to,
American. I would identify as Southern, but yes.
Yeah, but still, there isn't a Southern country out there. There's not like some Southern satellite country somewhere in Eastern Europe that you can move to. If you were to immigrate to an Eastern European country, your children will be Eastern Europeans. They will have no connection to your Southern culture.
Exactly. You can't replicate your own country elsewhere. They're one of a kind. I really enjoyed the conversation, Mr. Ernst. Is there anything you'd like to show or kind of let people know that you're working on or doing as we close out the stream today?
Well, thank you very much for having me on. Thank you for a great discussion. I don't have a lot to show. For me, it's just if you live abroad and you want to support these types of state-proof solutions happening in South Africa, you can become a friend of AfriForum. So you just search Friends of AfriForum on Google, and you can become a supporter of our organization. You can also, I just wrote a piece for IM 1776 called the Reintegration of the South African Order. You can go read that. Unfortunately, we've been having a lot of problems with the thumbnail of that article. That's why it hasn't been widely. We haven't shared it widely, but it is available on the site. Should be fine by tomorrow. It's modernity is its own punishment. But yeah, tomorrow I will be sharing it, but you can go check it out on the website as well. It's about our strategy here in South Africa. And lastly, you can I have a YouTube channel that's Africa focus and South Africa specifically, but also the African continent. You're not going to find streams discussing the 2024 election in America or um, the
The
story of the
Ukraine
week or
war.
the culture war story of the week or the Ukraine war, whatever. You'll find stories discussing solutions in South Africa, politics and happenings on the African continent. But I promise you, all of it relevant to other Western countries, just from a different angle. So yeah, go check out my YouTube channel. It's called Conscious Caracal. Uh, pretty pretty straightforward stuff. And then you can also follow me on Twitter. Same, Conscious Caracal. But yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity, AP. And yeah, I hope to see you again in the live chat section of my show as well. I'm glad that you tune in and find it insightful. And yeah, keep doing what you're doing. You're talking to a lot of very interesting guests, and great to see.
I try to bring on the high IQ people, That's what I gotta do. But I gotta say, if you can, please do support AfriForum. Support our guys. Stop giving your money to Coca-Cola and all these companies that hate you. All these all these conservatives who complain about the wokeness, and yet they still give money to these companies who hate them. Start giving money to our friends. Mr. Ernst Fenzil organization, AfriForum. Ian Smith would approve if you would do so.
Or just something simple. I mean, even just buying one less can of Coke this month or one less packet of cigarettes and taking that money, you don't even have to give it to AfriForum. Just identify an organization or any type of point of order in your community or in your area or in your town or wherever you live that's doing good work, that's doing something that's actually beautifying or making your community safer, making it better, helping those in need in your community, but in a genuine sense, in a Christian sense, not this welfare idea, but actually helping people to help themselves. Support that type of cause by buying one less packet of cigarettes or one less bottle of beer. Take that money, and if you give $20, $15, $5 to a good cause this month, you're doing more than 95% of everyone out there. And that's why I'm emphasizing, don't just give it to some massive faceless uh, welfare project or some type of
political organization.
political organization that you don't have any idea what they're going to do with that money. Identify a grassroots, close to home organization that isn't part of some big conglomerates or international network, and organizational initiative that you can see what they're doing. You can see what they're doing with your money, and then buy that one less packet of cigarettes or bottle of beer and go give them that month, this month or next month, and you're already in the top 5% of people actually having an impact on reality.
Very true, very pertinent advice. And as we close out the stream, remember everyone, the lie can't last forever. Keep